Welcome to the history section.
We're beginning our look at the Sengoku Jidai by examining the central ambition that really drove the great feudal leaders in the mid-16th century.
And that ambition had a very clear, a very specific geographical target.
It did. The goal was always a grand march on Quito.
Quito was the ultimate prize. Why was that? It wasn't just about capturing a city.
No, not at all. It was the seat of the imperial court, but more importantly, it was the home of the nominal Ashikaga shogunate.
So simply conquering your neighbor wasn't enough to claim national rule.
Exactly. You needed that central authority. The primary ambition was to establish central military control, and the mechanism for that was the shogun.
You had to gain physical control over the shogun's person.
That was the established objective. By holding the shogun, a warlord could, legally sanction his own wars of conquest.
So his campaigns were no longer just personal aggression.
Precisely. They were fought in the shogun's name. It was a righteous, officially sanctioned subjugation of the empire. It turned your rivals into rebels against the state.
A powerful psychological and legal weapon in an age that, despite the chaos, still valued those traditional structures.
Immensely so. Legitimacy was key.
Okay, so around 1540, who were the main players, the contenders who had the resources and the position to even attempt this march on the capital?
Well, we can really identify four prominent chiefs in central and eastern Japan who were serious aspirants.
Let's start in the north.
In Echigo province, you had the Uyesugi clan, a significant power base there.
And their great rival to the south.
That would be the Takeda clan, of course, in the province of Kai, a very strategic mountainous position.
And as we move towards the Pacific coast,
we find the Imagawa clan. They commanded a huge territory, the three provinces of Tsuchimi, Mikawa, and Suruga.
A massive block of land and resources, and the fourth.
Finally, holding the eastern Kanto plain from their fortress at Odawara was the Hoji clan.
So these four were the great powers, all eyeing each other, all eyeing Quito.
And it was the Imagawa who made the first move.
The first to commit everything to that goal.
Yes, in 1560, Imagawa Yoshimoto launched the first major campaign, aimed squarely at the capital. This wasn't a raid. He mustered an enormous army.
Something like 46,000 troops.
Drawn from all three of his provinces. The thinking at the time was clear. Unification would be won by sheer, overwhelming force.
But that massive campaign ended almost as soon as it began.
It was an immediate, decisive, and frankly shocking end. Just beyond his own frontiers, his entire host was routed.
And Imagawa himself was killed.
Slain by the vastly inferior forces of Oda Nobunaga at the Battle of Okihazama.
A battle that completely shattered the idea that numbers alone would decide the outcome of these wars.
It fundamentally reshaped the strategic landscape overnight. And it put Oda Nobunaga, a man who had been largely dismissed, at the very center of events.
His victory is even more astonishing when you consider his starting position.
It really is. Nobunaga succeeded his father, Oda Nobuhide, in 1549. He was only 16 years old.
And it's interesting to note this was the same year Francis Xavier landed at Kagoshima. Japan was in upheaval internally, but also just beginning to feel the tremors from the outside world.
Nobunaga's personal prospects were quite bleak. His inherited lands were tiny compared to the Imagawa or Takeda.
Just four small cantons in Owari province.
And he was completely surrounded by powerful enemies. His own personal reputation didn't help either.
The research is quite clear on this. He was known for erratic behavior and had a derogatory nickname.
Bakudono, Lord Fool. Even among his own retainers, he showed very few signs of political or military promise in those early years.
But something changed. Over the next decade, he didn't just survive, he stabilized his position.
He did. He consolidated his control within Owari, and critically, he began to attract exceptionally capable men to his side. He was a magnet for talent.
And the most pivotal of those men was the one who would become Toyotomi Hideyoshi.
Absolutely. A man named Tokichiri entered his service around 1558.
And his physical description is always emphasized.
Yes, he was short, scarcely 5 feet tall, with a wizened, almost monkey-like face. But that exterior housed a wiry, tireless physique and a phenomenal mind.
History tells us that even at this early stage, this Tokichiro was known as one of the keenest judges of character in Japan.
He had assessed the entire landscape of feudal power, and his conclusion was startling.
He chose the Lord Fool.
He decided that Oda Nobunaga, despite the reputation, was the coming man, the best vehicle for his own advancement.
Because Hideyoshi's own ambition was to achieve mastery.
And he recognized in Nobunaga the revolutionary genius and the decisiveness needed to break the old order.
and his judgment was proven right almost immediately.
From 1558 onwards, Nobunaga's rise just accelerates. By the end of 1559, he'd unified all of Owari province and repelled an attack from Ise.
Which sets the stage for the 1560 confrontation with Imagawa.
It does. And while popular accounts often give Hideyoshi a major strategic role to Okehazama, the truth is likely more complex.
The research suggests we should be suspicious of those claims.
The audacious, lightning-fast ambush that won the battle, that seems to be pure Nobunaga, his own particular brand of genius.
But the political fallout from the battle was immense, and it directly involved a young Tokugawa Iyeyasu.
Yes, Ieyasu was, at that time, a sub-feudatory of the Imagawa clan. He was only 18.
And Imagawa's death gave him the pretext to break away.
It did. And Nobunaga, seeing the opportunity, immediately made overtures to him.
This led to the Great Alliance that would define the next 2 decades.
A defensive and offensive alliance with a very interesting clause.
They agreed to mutual conquest, but with a condition.
The critical provision was that whoever reached Quito first and secured the shogun's commission would claim the subjection of the other.
So they were allies, but also competitors in a race to the top.
It established a secure eastern flank for Nobunaga and freed him to look west, toward the capital.
With Ieyasu guarding his rear, Nobunaga moved quickly to legitimize his new position.
In 1561, he went to Quito and got official sanction from the shogun for the territories he'd already conquered.
A crucial political move. Then he turned his attention to his northern neighbor, Saichu.
Correct, who held Mino province. After several years, he conquered it and made another key strategic decision.
He moved his headquarters
from Kiyosu in Owari to Saitu's former base at Inabayama, which he renamed Gifu, a much more central position for controlling Japan.
By 1568, he'd also taken the northern parts of Issei province.
And right at that moment, the Ashikaga shogunate itself began to implode, giving him the perfect opportunity.
The 14th shogun, Yoshiteru, was assassinated in 1565 by his own ministers.
Miyoshi and Matsunaga. Yoshiteru's younger brother, Yoshiaki, managed to escape and began desperately searching for a patron.
But the major powers of the day weren't interested.
No, he was refused help by Sasaki in Omi, then Takeda in Wakasa, and finally Asakura in Echizen. They were all too preoccupied with their own affairs.
So as a last resort, he turned to the rising power, Oda Nobunaga.
And Nobunaga offered not just promises, but prompt and substantial military support.
This wasn't altruism. Hideyoshi saw the strategic genius in this move.
Hideyoshi understood they needed a name, a mandate. By championing Yoshiaki's cause, every war Nobunaga fought from then on would be under the shogun's official command.
It provided the political legitimacy to conquer the entire empire.
Absolutely. But to get to Quito, they had to pass through Omi province.
The gateway to the capital. Nobunaga's approach here was a mix of diplomacy and force.
In the north, he won over the Lord Asai with a political marriage. He gave his younger sister to Asai.
But the southern half was held by Sasaki, who was allied with the faction in Kisto.
So Nobunaga waged a brief, brutal campaign and reduced Sasaki's castles,
which cleared the way. By the end of 1568, Nobunaga and his new ally, Asai, occupied Quito.
They installed Yoshiaki as the 15th, and as it turned out, the last Ashikaga shogun. Nobunaga was named vice shogun.
He was now the undisputed power behind the throne.
With control over his core provinces of Owari, Mino, and Ise, plus southern Omi and Quito itself.
It's a logical question to ask how he managed this with those much larger powers, Takeda and Uyesugi still looming.
Well, his external security really rested on 2 pillars. The first was just sheer luck.
The crippling mutual jealousy of the great chiefs.
They were too distrustful of each other to ever form a unified front against him.
And the second pillar.
The steadfast loyalty of his ally, Ieyasu,
who was busy consolidating his own power at the expense of the Imagawa.
Yes, Ieyasu's campaigns essentially took the huge clan out of the picture, preventing them from interfering with Nobunaga's push to the capital.
Which left the 2 giants, Takeda Shingen and Uyesugi Kenshin.
And their legendary rivalry, the Kawanakajima War, acted as a kind of strategic firewall for Nobunaga.
They were completely consumed with fighting each other.
For decades, 4 massive, famous, and ultimately indecisive battles starting in 1553. They were each other's sole focus.
So until 1572, they were occupied elsewhere. Uyesugi fighting the Hujuu, Takeda expanding south.
Their mutual preoccupation was the single greatest guarantee of Nobunaga's safety in the West.
But his internal situation was much less secure. He faced a massive crisis in 1570.
The so-called Great Conspiracy. It began when he attacked Asakura of Echizen for refusing to recognize the new shogun.
And then came the betrayal.
A shocking one. His own brother-in-law and confederate, Asai of Northern Ami, suddenly turned on him.
Why? What was the reason?
A few things. Asai was a close personal friend of Asakura. But more than that, he deeply resented the arrogant and often violent behavior of Nobunaga's troops in Kito,
So while Nobunaga was deep in Echizen, Asai attacked him from the rear
forcing Nobunaga into a desperate retreat. He barely escaped back to the capital.
and found himself facing an overwhelming confederacy.
Asakura, Asai, and the recently evicted Sasaki. The situation was stabilized only by Ieyasu's timely intervention,
At the Battle of the Anagawa,
where the combined Nobunaga-Ieyasu force managed to break their much larger army. But the threat wasn't over.
no, because now the militant clergy, the warrior monks, got involved.
Yes, the Miyoshi clan, supported by Buddhist priests from what is now Osaka, threatened Kitos, and Nobunaga was initially beaten back.
This allowed his enemies to take a vital position.
Asai, Asakura, and Sasaki established themselves on the sacred mountain of Hiesan, overlooking Kyoto, welcomed by the priests of the Enrakuji temple complex.
Nobunaga blockaded the mountain, but was forced to lift it at the shogun's request.
A fatal mistake for the monks. Nobunaga was not a man to forgive that kind of interference.
In 1571, he retaliated.
He razed the entire mountain complex, a devastating message that no institution, sacred or secular, could harbor his enemies and survive.
By 1573, the fates of his other enemies were sealed.
Hideyoshi, with his usual cunning, provoked Asai back into open conflict. Nobunaga used the pretext to launch a final campaign.
Asai was defeated and forced to surrender his domains.
And Nobunaga rewarded Hideyoshi with that entire vast fief, rated at 180,000 koku.
Which, added to his existing lands, instantly made Hideyoshi a major feudal lord in his own right.
At the same time, Asakura committed suicide, and his lands were given to another top general, Shibata Katsui.
This was the turning point. It eliminated his internal foes and empowered his best captains to push the frontiers of his domain outwards.
But just as he seemed secure, the political system he built in Kyoto began to fall apart.
The shogun he had installed, Yoshiaki, resented being a puppet.
He began to secretly correspond with Nobunaga's enemies, Mori, Uyesugi, and most critically, Takeda Shingen, inviting them to overthrow him.
And Takeda Shingen, perhaps the greatest military mind of the age, saw his chance.
In January 1572, he mustered his legendary army of 30,000 and marched west,
And Ieyasu had to throw himself directly into Takeda's path.
which led to the Battle of Mikitagahara. It was a complete disaster for Ieyasu.
An absolute rout. His army was shattered, and he barely escaped with his life back to Hamamatsu Castle.
Takeda could have, and probably should have, pressed the attack, but his officers were cautious.
They worried that a prolonged siege would give Nobunaga time to arrive with a relief force.
And more importantly, it would leave their rear flank exposed to Uyesugi once the winter snows melted.
So Takeda withdrew, but he was furious with Nobunaga for sending even a small reinforcement to Ieyasu.
He sent Nobunaga the severed head of one of his own officers killed in the battle, a clear end to any peaceful relations.
And in January 1573, Takeda invaded again.
But while besieging Noda Castle, he was hit by a sharpshooter.
The wound initially seemed to heal, but by April, as he was once again marching on Quito, it reopened.
And Takeda Shingen died suddenly. He was 53.
An almost unbelievable stroke of luck for Nobunaga.
It was. Takeda was arguably Nobunaga's equal as a soldier, but he was far superior as an administrator.
His system of governance in Kai was legendary.
So much so that Ieyasu later studied it exhaustively and adopted many of its features for his own domains. A huge endorsement.
Takeda's successor, his son Katsuyori, was not of the same caliber.
He was brave, but he lacked his father's tact and statesmanship. He quickly alienated the clan's veteran retainers.
Yet he remained a threat. In 1575, he invaded Mikawa again, forcing Nobunaga and Hideyoshi to come to Ieyasu's aid.
Which led to the famous relief of Nagashino Castle and a disastrous defeat for Katsuyori. He lost the flower of his army.
From there, the Takeda collapse just accelerated.
His officers defected, his territories were eroded, and by 1581, Nobunaga had assembled a massive coalition for the final blow.
The numbers are staggering. Nobutada with 50,000, Nobunaga with 70, Ieyasu and Huju with 30,000 each.
An army of 180,000 men. Katsuyori's own forces simply melted away in the face of it.
He fled to Tenmoku-san and was killed in April 1582 with only a handful of followers left.
And that was the end of the great house of Takeda. Their lands were divided, with Suruga going to Ieyasu, massively increasing his power.
With the east completely secure, Nobunaga's focus shifted entirely to the west, to the Chugoku region.
And that meant a direct conflict with the other great rising power, the Mushi clan, under Mushi Motonari.
Musha's rise is fascinating because his origins were so much more modest.
He came from a very minor branch of the family. He was adopted into a small samurai household with only about 60 acres, a self-made man.
But in 1523, he was chosen to become the head of the main Mushi family, finally giving him a real power base.
His early career was a masterclass in navigating the complex feudal politics of the time, shifting allegiances to survive.
The key moment for his expansion came in 1551, with a rebellion inside the Ochi clan, his overlords.
The Ochi lord committed suicide and entrusted Motonari with taking revenge on the rebel, Suie Harukata.
And Motonari's approach was brilliant. First, he secured legal justification.
He requested and received an imperial commission to punish the traitor. This gave his war a powerful moral and legal authority.
Then he faced the military problem. He had 5,000 men against Suie Harukata's 30,000.
He knew he couldn't win a straight fight. He famously said he would have to eke out the shortage in the lion's skin with the foxes.
This led to the deception at Miyajima Island.
A beautiful, famous location, Motonari began fortifying it, a move his own officers thought was a terrible tactical error.
Which was exactly what he wanted the enemy to think.
He deliberately spread rumors of his own incompetence. Suie Harukata took the bait and occupied the island with 20,000 men.
Moody then cut off his retreat on the mainland. The trap was set.
On a wild, stormy October night, he ferried his small force across to the island.
And he sent the boats back, giving his men the simple choice of do or die.
Suie had posted no sentries, confident no attack was possible in that weather. At daybreak, Muri's forces attacked.
The result was panic and a total rout. Suie's army was destroyed, and he committed harakiri.
That single victory made Muri Motonari a major power. By his death in 1571, he was the lord of 11 provinces.
For comparison, at that same moment, Nobunaga was master of only 3. It shows the scale of the challenge in the West.
And Mursi's successor, supported by his brilliant uncles, continued that expansion right up to Nobunaga's new frontier.
So this was the next great obstacle, and Hideyoshi was the man Nobunaga chose to overcome it.
Hideyoshi's western campaign from 1578 to 1582 was a masterpiece of military and engineering skill.
He systematically drove the Mubari out of province after province.
By June 1582, he was besieging the critical Takamatsu Castle, the key to the entire region.
And he did it by famously diverting a river and flooding the entire castle compound.
The castle was about to fall when the Mudri Relief Army arrived, creating a standoff.
It was at this moment that Hideyoshi made a very calculated political move.
Fearing that such a great victory might incite Nobunaga's jealousy, he sent a messenger begging his lord to come and supervise the final capture personally.
Nobunaga agreed. He ordered his captains, including Akechi Mitsuhide, to march west.
And he himself traveled to Kyoto with only a tiny bodyguard of about 100 men, taking up residence in the Hanaji Temple.
A fatal error. The capital was completely denuded of loyal troops.
Akechi Mitsuhide, marching from his castle, was supposed to head west. Instead, at the Gutsuragawa River, he wheeled his army around.
And uttered the famous line, "The enemy is in the Haniji."
He attacked the temple in the gray of morning. Nobunaga made a hopeless defense and, after being wounded, committed harakiri as the temple burned.
His eldest son and heir, Nobutada, was also killed. The unification of Japan came to a sudden, violent halt.
Akechi's betrayal is, of course, one of the most analyzed events in Japanese history.
The common narrative focuses on personal resentment.
It does. It emphasizes Akechi's fear that Nobunaga was about to confiscate his vast fief to give to a favorite page.
A fear amplified by a series of public humiliations.
Yes, the incident where Nobunaga, in a rough mood, seized Akechi's head and beat a tattoo on it with his iron fan. An unbearable insult for a proud man.
But there was also naked ambition. The Jesuits of the time saw him as a man whose ambition far outstripped his actual ability.
Though he clearly had ability. To rise from a lordless man, a ronin, to holding a fief of 500,000 koku is a remarkable achievement.
He saw a strategic opportunity in June 1582.
He did. He seized the capital and the emperor. He took Nobunaga's treasures at Azuchi. He considered Nobunaga's surviving sons to be weak.
And he believed his powerful rivals, Hideyoshi and Shibata, were too far away and too busy fighting to react in time.
A reasonable calculation, but one that failed to account for the political genius of Hideyoshi.
There have been conspiracy theories, of course, some suggesting Ieyasu was involved.
The evidence doesn't support it. Ieyasu was in sci-fi with a tiny bodyguard and had to flee for his life when the news broke. It's very difficult to see him as a co-conspirator.
Akechi's great miscalculation was underestimating Hideyoshi's speed.
At Takamatsu, Hideyoshi got the news first. He kept it completely secret from the Murray.
And concluded a very advantageous truce before they knew Nobunaga was dead.
The Muri uncle, Kobayakawa Takakaje, then advised immediate peace, declaring Hideyoshi was now more formidable than Nobunaga had ever been,
They even lent Hideyoshi troops, a stunning political reversal.
which allowed Hideyoshi to execute his famous Chugoku Great Retreat, racing his army back towards the capital.
Akechi's reign lasted just 13 days.
Hideyoshi defeated him in the Battle of Yamazaki. Akechi was killed by a peasant while fleeing the field.
This swift response cemented Hideyoshi's claim as Nobunaga's true successor, but he still had to deal with the succession crisis.
At the council in Gifu, Hideyoshi cleverly championed Nobunaga's infant grandson, Sambushi, as the heir.
An arrangement that immediately fell apart into civil war the next spring.
Shibata Katsui threatened Hideyoshi's rear from Ijizan.
Hideyoshi wheeled his army around and crushed him at the Battle of Shizugatake. Shibata committed suicide.
While all this was happening, Tokugawa Ieyasu was wisely staying out of the Oda family in the fighting.
He was consolidating his own power, absorbing the remnants of the Takeda domains. His power grew immensely in this period.
Which set up the final confrontation. In 1584, Nobunaga's last surviving son allied with Ieyasu against Hideyoshi.
Hideyoshi's nephew was beaten, and when Hideyoshi took the field himself, he met his equal in Ieyasu.
The Kamakiyama War was a strategic standoff. Neither could gain a decisive advantage, so they concluded a peace.
A peace secured by marriages and hostage exchanges.
It shows Hideyoshi's different approach. Nobunaga, for all his genius, was at his core a magnificent brute who relied on force.
Hideyoshi was different. He showed a consistent tendency to conciliate powerful rivals once he had them checked militarily. Mori, Ieyasu, the Shimadzu.
He seemed to understand that while brute force is powerful, it belongs to a more primitive stage of culture. He was the greater statesman, recognizing that long-term stability required integrating, not just eliminating, your former enemies.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.